We finally have proof that Kendrick Lamar's camp is done with the game. Two people from Kendrick's inner circle just exposed him as a clout-chasing liar, and what they said is absolutely brutal. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We now have the most definitive proof that Kendrick has truly lost all respect for the game. We're witnessing how a West Coast rapper betrayed Kendrick, and how he and his team aren't afraid to let everyone know about it. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because this is important and everyone needs to see what's happening here. To provide some context on how this all began, it started when The Game did an interview with none other than Big Boy. During the interview, he discussed meeting Kendrick Lamar for the first time and mentioned wanting to sign him. He said, "I was a little bit ahead of the curve from where they were, and I was always asking, but he was just like, no." While I couldn't show the full clip, there's considerably more banter where The Game claims he wanted to sign Kendrick, along with other statements. It seemed like he was pulling a LeBron James, attempting to take credit for something he didn't actually foresee. He was also speaking in a very condescending manner, subtly trying to talk down to Kendrick. Throughout the entire clip, he refers to Kendrick as a funny little guy. Even when discussing how Kendrick grew up and how it differs from the lifestyle The Game lived, he frames it as though implying that Kendrick is somehow lesser than him or not as tough, which is a strange thing to do. But this is The Game in 2025, so we can't expect anything less. As The Game was claiming that he recognized Kendrick's potential to become one of the greatest artists and rappers we've ever seen, he said he tried speaking with Top Dog to get Kendrick to sign with him. He wanted to mentor Kendrick and transform him into the next superstar. While we could have simply speculated about this, we've actually received direct confirmation and a response to The Game from none other than Kendrick Lamar's camp. We haven't just heard from one person. We've heard responses from two individuals. The first person to respond, and this is very significant, is none other than TuTu, Kendrick's longtime bodyguard and seemingly a very close friend who's been with him throughout much of his career. What he said was that The Game is faking. He never wanted to sign Kendrick, and he added multiple exclamation points to really drive this home. Just having Kendrick Lamar's bodyguard publicly state that what The Game is saying is a complete and utter lie shows a major disconnect. But don't worry, there's more that happened as well. Another close friend of Kendrick Lamar, someone who has been with him since day one and appears on the Pimp a Butterfly cover, if you can question that, also responded to The Game. What he said was that all The Game does is lie for clout. Once again, to see that coming from somebody who is literally ingrained in Kendrick Lamar's Hall of Fame, simply by being on the TPAB cover, the tone and the way this is being addressed speaks volumes. And if you needed more, TuTu came back out and doubled down on his stance, saying that he's not doing any faking this year. With all of this coming from two people who have been very close to Kendrick Lamar, not just for a few years or a brief moment, but since their inception in the rap game, to see The Game spoken about this way makes it very clear that Kendrick Lamar's side really doesn't mess with The Game, and they've truly lost all respect for him. I think when we address this beef, that's really the best way to contextualize it. They've lost all respect for him. Clearly, even with the way Kendrick's people are addressing The Game and his actions, it's not that they're necessarily mad. They're talking about The Game at this point like he's some cartoonish villain who constantly keeps sabotaging his own plans by saying and attempting to perpetuate the most ridiculous things imaginable. With that, I think it's fair to say that in terms of all the beefs Kendrick Lamar has had, out of all the beefs people have decided to start with him and what he's had to stand on, this Game situation may be the most complicated. If we go back in time and look at when Kendrick started to rise, The Game was still a very big name in hip-hop. The Game and Kendrick did get along when Kendrick was coming up. On all of The Game's biggest albums from 2011 onward, the Red Album, which featured the track The City, one of the best Kendrick Lamar features to this day, and certainly back then without a doubt. Kendrick was present. Then in 2012, he was on The Game's next album just a year later. When Kendrick truly became a full-on superstar, he was even on the documentary too. So back then, we clearly saw that things were good between Kendrick and The Game. In terms of the West Coast rap lineage, The Game was a guy who really held the torch in the 2000s, and Kendrick took it in the 2010s. Their partnership made sense and genuinely made the West Coast stronger. That's why, when we see Kendrick's people having to talk about The Game like this, because at the end of the day, This is all the game's fault, and he gave them no choice. It's sad and tragic in a way. Just like a lot of people who had a falling out with Kendrick Lamar and turned against him as he ascended higher and higher in the rap game. Their beef really started, and much of this tension began to rise precisely when Kendrick Lamar became bigger than they ever did and gained more success than they ever saw, all while never having to compromise his integrity once or do something genuinely embarrassing, which many of these rappers, especially The Game, cannot claim. When we look at the entire trajectory of The Game and Kendrick, The Game has really backed himself into a corner, and there's no longer anything he can do. Kendrick's people speaking about him so publicly and showing that he's a pathetic, lying clout chaser. That's not only proof showing us that Kendrick definitely doesn't like the guy, but also means that Kendrick really doesn't believe The Game will ever reach a place where they could find some sort of mutual respect or patch things up for the betterment of the West. He thinks that's all gone. When you really think about what Kendrick has done for the West Coast, from putting on all the artists he did on GNX to the Pop Out, where we saw a celebration of West Coast hip-hop culture in a fashion we'd never seen before, it's important to understand this. If Kendrick loves not just rap, but where he's from and what hip-hop means to it as much as he clearly does, which is evident from his efforts to be the embodiment and truly the face of it all, while helping not just himself but everyone else he possibly can, then this situation with The Game represents a significant breakdown. To sit here and be at a point where he and his people are calling The Game pathetic, well, it's becoming very clear that Kendrick has lost all hope for classic Game, the guy who made some of the best albums of the 2000s and early 2010s, to ever come back. Kendrick has seen the absolute worst in him, and there's probably a lot more behind the scenes that we don't even know about. But if we break down why Kendrick has now fully turned on The Game and why he will never make peace with him, at the end of the day, The Game has nobody to blame but himself. The guy has been an absolute walking clown. Not just himself or his legacy, but in the process of The Game's run over the last 5 years or so, he's managed to try and tarnish and destroy the name of both the West Coast and its hip-hop scene as a whole, along with the people who helped build him. If we remember, Dr. Dre helped make The Game who he is. He played an integral role not just in handing him that West Coast torch, but in making him a real rap superstar at the time with albums like The Documentary and everything built around that moment. I know it feels strange now, but if you remember, in 2022, The Game really did go on a whole press tour where he vowed to essentially try and take down Dr. Dre's legacy and his impact in hip-hop, which of course is undeniable. But he was foolish enough to even attempt it and smear his name in whatever way he could. He said things like Kanye did more for him in 2 weeks than Dre did in his entire career. Really? Besides giving The Game the beat for the track Dreams from The Documentary, which is one of the best rap songs of the 2000s. What else did Kanye even do for him? Meanwhile, Dre helped The Game alongside 50 Cent and Eminem like they were a musical dynasty. Even when we think about the Pop Out and how The Game was, of course, not there, we found out he wasn't invited. We saw Dr. Dre come out as a legend on that stage. He performed Still Diary. Then he and Kendrick did California Love. And then Dr. Dre cued us into Not Like Us. Having Dr. Dre really be the gatekeeper there for West Coast hip-hop history. When you think about the lineage and pantheon that Kendrick has created all through his love and desire to have unity in the West, The Game stands in the way of all of that with his beef with Dr. Dre. I think even when we look at that 2022 Super Bowl, which seemingly was a reason why The Game turned on Dr. Dre and started saying all these ridiculous things, it was because Dre didn't ask him to perform in a halftime show. On a side note, I think that 2022 Super Bowl halftime show really needs its own analysis, because in terms of creating a lot of the riffs and beefs in hip-hop and music that we see today, there were ripple effects that I do think ended up resulting in a lot of the stuff we saw during the Kendrick-Drake beef. But there's still so much unresolved between all the different players as well. To put it simply, a lot of rappers' egos were really bruised during that time, from 50 Cent, which was a whole other thing in a whole other video, and that seems to be a lot of the reason why he had animosity toward Kendrick Lamar when all the Drake stuff was going down, to The Game not being asked at all, then turning on Dr. Dre and even projecting a lot of that jealousy onto Kendrick Lamar. There's so much in terms of the lineage of hip-hop and all these major players who have been at the face of their respective eras and are always at the center of the culture, whether that's for better or for worse. Many of these issues we're talking about right now really do seem to stem back to that very moment. When you look at how the game already managed to absolutely ruin his reputation with Dr. Dre, and then in addition to that, you see how the game has been one of the only guys on the West Coast. And again, as somebody who literally handed Kendrick the torch, it's almost offensive how he clearly took a pro-Drake stance during the beef and ultimately let his love for Drake separate him from the rest of his coast. Because really with the game, kind of like what J. Cole did, to see him act like he was passive, but really by being passive and acting like he didn't want any division or didn't want to pick sides, he was really picking Drake's side. To this day, he supports far more pro-Drake things than pro-Kendrick. In that moment, in the biggest rap beef of all time, in this moment where the West Coast is tested, and we really did find out how much the rest of the music world just doesn't respect or want to see the West Coast on top, for whatever reason that may be, the game chose to take the side of the Canadian over Kendrick Lamar, who, again, he passed the torch to in that ever-iconic moment where Kendrick was really crowned as that next guy in the lineage of Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, The Game, and then all the way to Kendrick as the next face of this integral and truly genre-shifting, culturally defining aspect that has changed hip-hop like no other. When you see all of this and watch The Game standing out here, lying like an absolute loser now, it's no surprise why Kendrick's people are talking about him the way they are. I think what makes all this a little worse when you think about it, and just shows how far the game has really fallen, is that this is exactly what's happened here, a catastrophic fall-off. Honestly, it's sad because, unlike a lot of these losers in rap who do fall off, the game used to be an amazing rapper. Really, from the years 2005 to 2015, he put out a run of classic albums, genre-defining albums, some of the best albums of the 2000s and those early 2010s. Albums like the Red Album were some of the best of their time. I'll expand this script while maintaining the professional tone and key points. Here's an enhanced version. So to see him go from that, from being a figure who stood for so much and was a face of the West Coast until Kendrick, to now being a Drake-loving, verse-scamming cornball, this is such a sad descent to witness. Once again, it's showing us that even in terms of the inner workings of the West Coast, the game couldn't handle somebody like Kendrick, who, again, wasn't immersed in the very culture and lifestyle that the game represented. As the game himself says, Kendrick was kind of a nice guy. He was humble and wasn't involved in the same circles that the game believed he needed to be in to be a so-called tough guy. To see Kendrick rise the way he did while never conforming to any of the standards that not just the music industry demanded, but also the very culture that allowed rappers to ever be seen by it. I think that's really the factor with Kendrick Lamar that makes so many rappers completely break and lose all integrity and decency when they talk about him. They end up having this weird kind of beef standoff with him. Honestly, for a lot of these guys who probably did whatever the industry told them to and were always chasing trends, whether they were really good at it or not, it must be absolutely maddening to see the biggest rapper in the world and the most important name in the entire space become just that while staying true to himself. As Kendrick told us on the Mask Off remix he did with Future, a conscious rapper went commercial while only making conscious albums. That's the part that probably eats at them the most. He didn't have to compromise. He didn't have to change who he was, and he still became the biggest artist in the game. I think one of the reasons why Kendrick's people just told the game off in this very moment and said, "We are done," is also the fact that while the game is out here lying about Kendrick and trying to big bro him in these stories he's telling, he's only doing it because he's trying to pick up attention. He has a new project dropping. This is classic game behavior at this point. If we go back to the album he dropped in 2022, Drillmatic, which was that whole weird clout-chasing record where he made the whole thing about dissing Dr. Dre and Eminem, he used that 10-minute Eminem diss track, which ended up amounting to nothing, as the big draw for the album. He positioned it as this monumental statement that was going to change rap forever and destroy Eminem's name and expose him for whatever he thought he was going to expose him for. But what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing came from it, except the game damaging his own reputation even further. Listen, even with that album Drillmatic, which did have a lot of very good music on it, the game is a competent rapper, and that's what's so frustrating about his fall-off. Once again, even though the Drake stans love this guy, because he's against Kendrick, the game really does what they accuse Kendrick of doing, and what Drake actually does, which is used diss for the purpose of dissing somebody or creating controversy to get listeners to engage with a project. The irony is almost too much to handle. The very thing they criticize Kendrick for, using beef strategically, is exactly what the game has built his entire recent career on. The difference is, Kendrick's music stands on its own merit. He doesn't need controversy to sell records. The game, at this point in his career, seemingly does. I think right now, with what we're seeing here and with the game always trying to pander and appeal to Drake fans, especially now in this post-beef landscape, what we're witnessing is that the game does have a project dropping, a Gangsta Grillz project, the first of his career, which is actually significant. Of course, it's with the one and only DJ Drama, a legendary figure in his own right. And the record that just come out, it's brand new. But I'm sure on that record, he's going to be making moves to try and get more listeners to come in by using this very feud that he's been in the middle of in so many different ways. He'll pick one side, finally claim his flag there, plant it firmly in Drake's camp, and ultimately disappoint the very coast that he's from. It's a pattern we've seen before, and it's one that's becoming increasingly predictable and, frankly, tiresome to watch. I don't know how else to say it. When you look at this in terms of hip-hop and the West Coast lineage that he's been a part of, he's on the wrong side of everything. Every major decision he's made in recent years has put him further away from the culture and the community that made him. It's genuinely sad to see someone who was once so integral to the West Coast sound and identity become this isolated figure who seems more interested in stirring up drama for attention than contributing anything meaningful to the culture. And again, while the game is a competent rapper, and let's be clear, he still has technical ability, to see him resort to all of these things, these tired tactics and desperate plays for relevance, is genuinely sad. As Kendrick Lamar sees these very things and recognizes that despite whatever skill the game has, he's just going to continue to resort to clown antics to get across or do whatever he's trying to do. Well, here we are. This is where we've ended up. Kendrick and his team have clearly decided that there's no redemption arc here, no path back to mutual respect or collaboration. They've seen enough to know that the game isn't going to change, isn't going to suddenly find his integrity again, and isn't going to stop using Kendrick's name for attention whenever he needs a boost. Ultimately, while this is unfortunate and represents a real loss for West Coast hip-hop unity, I guess as Kendrick Lamar told us, and always knew was going to come, this entire chapter and moment we're in, while a lot is changing in rap, and nobody knows what the future is going to look like, one thing Kendrick Lamar knew he was going to do when he did all of this was expose everybody who has ever been a fake, a fraud, and who has ever stood against him. That was part of the purpose of everything that happened this year, from the Drake beef to the Pop Out to the GNX album. Kendrick knew that by standing firm in his principles and refusing to compromise, he would force everyone else to reveal who they really are. And just like we're seeing now to this very day, they're never going to get over it. The game will never get over the fact that Kendrick surpassed him without having to adopt any of the behaviors or tactics that the game thought were necessary for success. That's what really hurts him. And that's why we're seeing this behavior. That's what we've got right now. This is the state of things. And it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. Let me know your thoughts on Kendrick Lamar and his people finally showing publicly that they don't mess with the game and have no problem making that stance crystal clear. It's a significant moment because it shows that Kendrick's camp isn't interested in maintaining fake peace or pretending everything is fine when it's not. They're being honest and direct, which is refreshing in an industry where people often hide their true feelings behind diplomatic language. Listen, it's a special day. It's a big day, and we're going to have fun this Friday. There's a lot happening in hip-hop right now, and we're here to cover all of it. More content is going to be dropping very soon. So be ready for that, because it's going to be a big day for the channel and for hip-hop news in general. But if you want to see how, right before the situation with the game, on another note with a very weird and unexpected beef, Drake just crashed out on Childish Gambino after Gambino dissed him at Camp Flog Gnaw, and how Drake and his team freaked out in response. It's definitely a good one with how pathetic they really got. The way they handled that situation was something else entirely. You're not going to want to miss this one. So check out the suggested video where we break down everything that happened, all the context you need to understand it, and why it matters for Drake's reputation moving forward.